Welcome to the Cybersecurity Podcast. It's the Cybersecurity Podcast with a little extra BS. I'm Andrew Nuxel.
And I'm Nathaniel Dick, and here today we're going to talk about some security considerations in AI. And also, we're going to go over our breaches. Andrew?
We'll start with CDW. So CDW has apparently been breached, and information collected by threat actor, including particularly, it seems like, government-related contract information. So that's really scary and relevant right now. Apparently, the attackers initially requested an $80 million ransom, which is among the highest I've ever heard of. And subsequently, negotiations failed. So that data has apparently been published. So the second breach we're going to talk about is 23andMe. So this one, not nearly as business critical. It probably is going to impact many more people from a personal perspective. And the list of impacted users hasn't been released yet, but in short, what 23andMe has disclosed is that through the use of passwords that were divulged on the net from other previous breaches, a group of threat actors has logged in and been able to access accounts in many cases, capture that data, and so on. So I think the big lesson from this one is going to be you have to use unique passwords and change your password frequently. And I don't believe that I'm one that's impacted by the breach, but I did submit for 23andMe several years ago, and they do offer two-factor authentication. So that's an important tool that makes it much more difficult for someone to compromise an individual account. So
any type of account out there, even if you set it up 5-10 years ago, go back and turn on the two-factor authentication or delete the account if you don't need it anymore. I think that's one that a lot of people set up the account and then probably forget about it, and then for sure change that password, but probably the best option is just to set up that two-factor authentication.
Yeah. Most companies that you deal with or any place that you have an account, it's almost become an exception to not have some sort of two-factor authentication available.
Expect it to be hacked, because lead into our topic of the podcast, AI. So we're going to be talking about AI and its security risks for organizations and some things that we can think about with regard to AI and how we can protect ourselves from some of the AI risks. So just to kind of start off the discussion, AI is a pretty big deal. In the last year, we've seen ChatGPT, OpenAI kind of flood the market. We've seen a lot of organizations have different mixed responses. Some organizations think that you should use it, and others are a little bit more hesitant. What type of data vectors, Andrew, do you see in, like, it adds a lot more data out there when we talk about AI? What are you seeing out there?
I think the real data concerns are, where does that data end up? And ChatGPT, I think has already confirmed that they had a data breach. Some accounts were captured, and some data was disclosed, and so on. So like every organization, I think that it's safe to say it's inevitable that data gets disclosed in some form or fashion. Doesn't mean there aren't provisions in place and security in place, but like we talked about in our first episode, there's always the human element. That's the weak link. That's where it's going to start. And so you have to be acutely aware of how important the data that you're putting in there is. So I think that first and foremost, you want to be sure, are you putting anything sensitive? Are you putting privacy information, et cetera, into a tool like this? If so, you probably want to pause and think about that again and try to use it a little bit more as a resource to enhance tools and improve processes and do research, as opposed to process privacy or confidential data. Because I think until we have better assurances as to how that data is protected, it just has an inherent risk to being disclosed or used in unexpected ways.
Yeah, I think a couple of things come to mind too. Is Well, right now it's using somewhat public knowledge to generate some of these models like ChatGPT. As organizations start adopting this, I know Azure has their own cognitive search that our organization has started exploring. You can actually train it to accept sensitive data. So now that we open another data vector for Azure or AWS or another tool, a AI tool, we're going to train it to try to figure out the data and try to help us as an organization. That inadvertently could create another vector of risk. Now you have this data exposed. And I think the other thing is a data poisoning attack. It could accidentally, or hackers could use the data to train it in such a way that now you have data that could create faulty models of data. And now we're relying on it as an organization to make decisions. So that's a pretty large vector risk that we have to be careful as organizations to make sure as we use AI that we're being careful, just like any other type of application and tool, that the entire tool, we're thinking about all the different inputs and outputs, how they're protected and secured.
AI still is imperfect, and in some cases is drawing incorrect conclusions. And while it's impressively intelligent about some things it can aggregate and determinations it can make and outputs it can produce, it still has what they call the occasional hallucination, which is, it takes data and for whatever reason draws an incorrect conclusion or creates a new narrative that similar to what you're saying with the data poisoning. The output doesn't end up the same. So what happens if it does that with the data that your organization has submitted? It could get ugly pretty quick.
Definitely, and just making sure that users are aware of those risks is key. I think the other flip side is there are some valuable security tools that are out there that AI has. I know Microsoft is starting to use AI in some ways to detect anomalies with some of their security tools. Others like SentinelOne, McAfee, Fortinet, most of the high players in the security space have their own version of AI or anomaly detection. Definitely can be a big tool that organizations that sometimes are understaffed just because there's a lot of security threats out there. AI can be used to take a look at these threats. We've got all these risks. We've got all these threats and data coming in, terabytes of data for some organizations, even more for others. And it can be hard for us as humans to analyze this data and detect anomalies, detect what data we should focus on. So I think there's some really cool pieces of AI that have the potential to take off, but it's still those security considerations that hackers could use those too to generate phishing emails, crafted attacks, crafted malware. We've seen that as well in some of the different AI tools, and that's a big danger as well.
Yeah, shortly after our last podcast, we received a phishing email that I'm 100% was crafted by AI. And fortunately, there was conversation between our end users before any action was taken. But I mean, it could have very easily turned into financial fraud. And the way that it was crafted, it was made to look like an email trail had been going on extensively between an executive and a vendor, and that the executive had approved for payment of around $50,000 to be sent to this group immediately. And the main reason it stopped was because on the finance side, the person said, it just seems like there's too much of a sense of urgency for something like this. It said it had been dragging on for several months, and it wasn't something that was going to impact production should the bill not be paid. And thank goodness they asked, hey, does this seem right to you? And we looked, and we're like, you can tell, this is well crafted, but it wasn't something that the executive asked for. We asked the right questions and figured it out. But I think AI, like you said, there are a lot of tools built in Azure. Zoom has announced that, that you can craft meeting minutes after a meeting with an AI tool. If it's not already widely available, it's coming. Different collaboration tools will summarize meetings, and so on. So there are a lot of good uses for it out there, but it can be weaponized just as easily as it can be leveraged for security. And I wonder how far away we are from a science fiction ending where computers are battling one another and we're standing on the sidelines.
Every day it seems like we're seeing new breaches. We were just talking before the episode about how many breaches are out there. It's like a weekly occurrence, and we haven't really seen a lot of sophistication yet in some of the major breaches with AI. But once those go online and hackers start even more utilizing than they are now, it could be a scary landscape out there, even scarier than it is right now. And I think you're right. One of the things that I always used to tell users is be aware of spelling mistakes in emails.
Yeah.
Those are just a classic sign. And now I'm seeing these like sophisticated emails, and they've got links that kind of look pretty good. And it's really crafted well, almost better than some internal communications at most companies.
Spelling mistakes are always one thing you could key on, but it's like having an advanced grammatical and spelling checker built in. I mean, all a threat actor has to do is run their script through some AI tool to have it clean it up and make it that much more impactful and effective.
I do think, talking about some of the security tools, one of the things that I think has been the biggest game changer for me in an organization, analyzing risk data. I have a hard time seeing all these inputs and making sense of that data. And there are some tools out there. If somebody just Google AI security tools, it's a really good list. Or if you're using a threat product, there are some usually built-in AI tools. And a lot of it comes around anomaly detection. I think that could be the game changer here. Do we see more and more of that? I think as organizations start to roll that out, we see, okay, I'm connecting usually from 7 to 6 or something at my work at this IP address. If I have this AI tool running in the background, it immediately detects an anomaly. Okay, I'm connecting at 2 in the morning. You could start creating actions based on that event to shut down that account until further investigation has started. Could be a game changer in that space.
One thing that is a consistent problem in IT, we talked about in the past, alarm fatigue. People see the same alarm come in over and over. Oh, this is, well, AI can bypass that with logic. Hopefully you can. I think the key is going to be effectively tuning it to understand what's expected, but it's going to have a lot of capabilities in terms of rationalizing logins, decisions that are made, behavior, traffic, et cetera, and hopefully put that together and make tools more
Could
advanced.
be also, like you said, yeah, there's a lot of false positives out there. And so do I start to read all those alerts come in and I start thinking, oh, it's an AI alert, so it's not as important. And then the model gets better and better and start to not pick up on some of these alerts. I think that's a good point, because then do we also start becoming a little bit more stupid as security professionals and rely on the AI instead of our own common sense to evaluate security incidents?
Yeah. Just like memory, or I used to have a great memory until I had a smartphone. I could remember 20-digit numbers, no problem. You could recite something, I could, remember it for years. And then I started saving everything on, all my phone numbers and all my notes into to smartphones. I have to go back and look at them. Like, that part of my brain has completely died. I no longer have the capability that I had. I'd like to blame it on getting old, but I think it's more technology has taken over for that. Math with calculators. There are a lot of people that just don't practice math or understand math and rely on a calculator to do it. And this is going to be an extension of that. I think you're probably onto something. How long before we forget security fundamentals or general fundamental work and rely on somebody else or something else to do it for us? And flip side of that is you start getting a little bit more advanced in other areas that you didn't have expertise in before. But how do you find real understanding of things if you don't have the fundamental base?
That's totally right. And I've used these models in the past, and thankfully it still relies on good inputs. You have to know what to feed it. So I'm optimistic that maybe they will get better and better, so we get dumber and dumber. But at the current moment, you still need to have the good inputs, like the content that you want it to say. You need to know how to use the tool, just like a smartphone, to be able to get a good output. And what I found it actually very useful for is to kind of check work or to even generate security policies and understand. I would probably do a Google research if I'm trying to generate a policy. What do other organizations say? What are best practices? What is the NIST standard out there? And so you can use this tool and generate a template that's probably as good as most templates you could purchase at most security consulting groups. And it's kind of a game changer for smaller businesses who don't have a lot of resources to do policy generation or creation and
as long as add to that things like job descriptions, writing job descriptions. That's something I've played around with it in there. I'm looking for someone that does something specific, craft a job description, and it comes out. And then you can go back and say, oh, well, I really want somebody that has X, Y, and Z certification and at least 5 years of experience, and it'll rewrite it for you instantaneously. Same with policies. Another thing you started to touch on, but I think is a good use case, is debugging of code. So if you have a code that for whatever reason isn't optimized, I've seen it take a piece of code that was effective, but way too verbose, too long, and consolidate it and get the correct result with fewer steps and so on. So that's another thing that I think is going to be a big win.
Okay, let's think about this, though. This sci-fi scenario you brought up, computers attacking computers, that's a real concern. Like, that's actually something that could happen, where we get computers that we don't have models that could be even under human supervision, and they could start generating automated malware, DDoS attacks.
Yeah,
it's a real concern, and that's scary.
And especially when you think about, what a threat cyber warfare is, and countries and nation states hacking terrorist organizations, you name it, leveraging this and back and forth.
Continue to see threats from a lot of different countries, and we're starting to have a pretty robust response just to protect critical infrastructure. We saw the pipeline attack a few years ago, and it has real effects to our daily life. I mean, CDW, they're a large company. They can spend maybe $100 million without too much effort, but these smaller organizations could be crushed by a vigorous attack. Yeah. So making sure that our small businesses are protected and they understand the risks of AI is going to be key.
Yeah. Agreed.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a really great discussion about security and AI, and I think we'll continue to have more conversations about AI in the future. But what's going on in Cybersecurity Awareness Month for you, Andrew?
A lot of awareness and education is the big thing. Just we've kind of shifted our strategy where I am to more micro learning and away from the 1 hour sit in front of your computer and just click next while you ignore it and work on something else, to let's try to make a real relevant training and awareness program. So moving to micro learning and interactive training and simulation to better prepare users. I think that's the big thing on our side. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's really key. And what I found is helpful is like user interaction, getting their thoughts on security risks that have happened for a user. So sharing stories and making sure users feel like they're part of a connected team in the organization, and everyone's on the security team. Hopefully, is the end goal.
So outside of Cybersecurity Month, what's your favorite thing about fall?
I love the weather. I mean, this is my first fall in North Carolina, and it's pretty amazing with the 70s in October. So enjoying
Yeah.
it out and hiking and stuff. How about you?
Yeah, leaves are going to start changing soon. Agreed, weather is awesome right now. One thing I'd add is, people that know me know I am a big fan of beer, so a lot of Oktoberfests or celebrations and brews are available now. So that's always one of the things I like about fall. Beyond that, I'm generally not a fan because it means winter's coming, and I hate cold weather. But yeah, I try to be optimistic and happy about, hey, well, I really like Oktoberfest beers, generally speaking, and the celebrations and festivals that go along with it. And there are a lot of those that are popping up. So I like that.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, but thanks for all the comments. Please subscribe to our podcast, give us some feedback, some input, and we'd love to keep collaborating with everyone out in the security world. Any final thoughts, Andrew?
Yeah, agreed. Just any feedback that people have, we really appreciate it. Share, let your friends know, colleagues know, and tell us what we can do better, because we really enjoy talking and sharing and hope to continue doing it.
Well, happy Cyber Awareness Month, everyone, and stay safe, cyber safe out there.